We know Oliver Wahlstrom's time on Long Island may have come to an end, but are there teams out there interested in trading for his rights? We've got that and a lot more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Friday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Hockey GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing your hockey franchise? Well, now you can with Ultimate Hockey GM. It's completely free, and Locked On listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in the game store. To download the game, just visit hockeygm.app or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate Hockey GM, start your dynasty today. Lots to discuss on today's show, but first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, shoot us an email at lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You can also follow the show on X at Locked On Isles, and you can follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR, VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all the time during the offseason. That's hirings, firings, trade rumors, free agency, the draft. If it's happening to the Islanders, we'll have it covered for you here on the Locked On Islanders podcast. And it's always great to talk Islanders hockey with you, game time or anytime. We are rapidly approaching the end of the NHL season. It's either going to be Friday if the Florida Panthers win Game 6 in Edmonton, or Monday when Game 7 is scheduled to take place. And that's it. That's as far as the season can go. The NHL draft is a week away. Free agency starts a few days after that on July 1st. So there's going to be a lot of stuff happening in the next, let's say, 3 weeks in and around the National Hockey League, and specifically to our New York Islanders. And the name that is going to come up the most, the name that is going to be at the center of it all, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your view, is Lou Lamoriello, because he is the ultimate decision maker for the New York Islanders. And one of the many things that is still on the table for the New York Islanders is the future of Oliver Wahlstrom. And the thing about Wally, we could sit here and talk about his situation in whether or not the Islanders did a good enough job in giving him a chance in the NHL, whether they handled his development properly. We know that under Barry Trotz, there was some tough love for Wahlstrom. He never really got much of a chance to establish himself in the Islanders lineup. And, he only played more than half the games. Well, let's say this. He only played 45 or more games in one season out of the 5 that he's been a part of the Islanders, or at least appeared in some games for the Islanders. That was 21-22, where he had 13 goals and 24 points in 73 games. All of those numbers, the games, the goals, the points, are career highs. And for a former first-round pick who is now 24 years old, those are not very impressive numbers. And Wahlstrom is currently a restricted free agent. So as far as the Islanders are concerned, they basically have to decide whether to make him a qualifying offer before July 1st. And he is arbitration eligible, so certainly he has that small amount of leverage. Although, if you look at his numbers over the course of his career, the fact that he has played in the last 2 seasons combined 67 games with the Islanders, 9 goals, 22 points, 40 penalty minutes, a -1 plus minus. He just never really found a place in the Islanders lineup. There have been issues with his hockey IQ, particularly what he does when he doesn't have the puck. His skating is not great, to say the least. And maybe he needs a little more time to release his shot than he gets typically in the National Hockey League. So the Islanders, since Patrick Waugh took over, Wally got his chances early on and then rode the bench for the vast majority of the season after that. And you sort of look at his, games played last year, and, he after the coaching change was made, he played in a bunch of games up until February 24th. So that was 8 games he played under Patrick Waugh after the coaching change was made. And then from February 24th until the season finale, almost 2 months later, he rode the pine all the time. Now, my inclination is that Oliver Wahlstrom has played his last game for the New York Islanders. Why? Well, he really doesn't seem to have a place in the lineup. Patrick Waugh gave him a chance and then didn't go back to him even when other players were slumping and struggling. Well, there are some rumors out there that, Wally is looking for a change of scenery most likely. The Islanders would love to move him, and there are 3 teams who have been described as potentially interested in Oliver Wahlstrom. 2 of them are in strict rebuilding mode. That's the Anaheim Ducks and Chicago Blackhawks. Look, Wally is not going to cost a lot. Let's not kid ourselves. I'd be shocked if he earned $1 million a season on a new deal. And then the third team, which to me makes maybe the most sense, is the Pittsburgh Penguins. I mean, Anaheim and Chicago, both kind of in rebuilding mode, although hoping to take that next step to at least contending for a playoff spot this coming season. But Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Penguins, supposedly have expressed interest, and there have been numerous stories around hockey media that indicate that Oliver Wahlstrom there could be some interest there from the Pittsburgh Penguins. They need depth. The Penguins, as we know, and they've been a division opponent of the Islanders forever, really. The Penguins need depth behind their top 6 scorers, and Wahlstrom, at least on paper, has the potential to do that. And I think a change of scenery benefits both the Islanders and Wahlstrom. The question now becomes, do the Islanders look to re-sign Wally, which I think is unlikely? Do they look to trade his rights to one of these teams or another team that, hasn't been listed here? Or do they just let him go as a free agent, not make the qualifying offer? To me, that third option makes the least sense, because you want to get something for Oliver Wahlstrom. And I don't necessarily think they can get a lot, but in the next week, before July 1st, you figure, if they can get even a mid-round or late-round pick, or maybe the rights to negotiate with a different restricted free agent, or if Wahlstrom is a sweetener instead of a draft pick on a deal that helps the Islanders upgrade their lineup, you will try to do that. That is the option that really is a win-win for both player and team. So the question is, will Oliver Wahlstrom be traded, or his rights be traded? Will he be re-signed, or will he just hit the open market? If he hits the open market, he'll go somewhere, and there'll be a team that will view him as sort of a low-risk, high-reward guy, where they'll sign him for $850,000. That's roughly the number I would expect him to make. Somewhere between $775,000 and $1 million is where I would expect Wahlstrom's salary to be. You probably sign him to an incentive-laden 1-year or 2-year deal, and you give him a shot. And if it doesn't work, you either send him down to the AHL or you let him go. You put him on waivers. Nothing much really lost in doing it that way. But to me, the Penguins would be an interesting spot because the Islanders would have to face him 3 or 4 times a year, and possibly in the playoffs if they ever face Pittsburgh again in the postseason. And obviously, any success that Wally would have, certainly the Islanders would be very aware of it if Wally stays in the Metropolitan Division. But we're getting ahead of ourselves right now. Let's see what Lou Lamoriello decides to do about Oliver Wahlstrom, whether he ends up making a trade, which I think he should, both for the team's benefit and for Wally's benefit. And look, let's hope they can get something in return, whether it's independent of any other deal or as part of a deal that helps the Islanders improve their top 6. A lot of options out there, but trading Oliver Wahlstrom, I think, makes the most sense. All right, we have got a lot to get to on today's show. We'll continue our look at different players who the Islanders could select with the 20th overall pick. Today, Liam Greentree is our profile, and then we conclude our player-by-player look at the Islanders season with Semyon Varlamov, the goalie. We've got that. We've got a lot more coming up. Oh, yes, for our Islanders' birthday of the day, a defenseman who won 2 Stanley Cups with the Penguins and finished his career with the Islanders in 1994-95. Let's see if you can guess who that is. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by the Ultimate Hockey GM. Islander fans, I want to take a moment to bring you up with one of our partners, the mobile game Ultimate Hockey GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing your hockey franchise? Do you think you could run the Islanders better than Lou Lamoriello? Well, your dream can come true, and this game is most definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the seasons, and lead it to glory. Hire the right coaches and staff, trade players or draft picks, navigate through free agency and the draft, all in a challenging and realistic game world. As an Islander fan, you know there is no offseason. GMs are constantly making moves at every point of the year to improve their team's chances, and that's why I think you're going to love this game. Ultimate Hockey GM is completely free and playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. By the way, Locked On Network listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using promo Locked On NHL in the game store, so make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit hockeygm.app or look it up in the app stores. Ultimate Hockey GM, start your dynasty today. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we continue our look at players the Islanders might just be looking to draft with that 20th overall pick. And as I've said, we're going to continue to do that until the Islanders either make the pick or trade the pick. Today, we look at winger Liam Greentree. He is a left shot forward, but he's mostly played right wing in juniors. He is 6'3", 211 pounds, even though he is only 18 years old, turned 18 on New Year's Day. So a New Year's baby. Had 36 goals and 90 points in 64 games this year for the Windsor Spitfires. Had 33 penalty minutes. Yeah, he was a minus 14, so that's certainly, not ideal. But again, that stat is more of a team stat than it is a individual stat. And he was one of the top scorers in the Ontario Hockey League. But when he played for Team Canada in 2 different tournaments, well, it was, hit and miss. He was a little bit inconsistent. He's a large winger. He has legitimate skills. He has an above average shot. His puck skills are there. His skating, unfortunately, not his strongest suit. And, he's not the most physical guy, but he does have creativity. He competes well and can use his size in front of the net. He's not going to shy away. The big issue is his skating. He doesn't have great speed, and that's going to be the key. Given his skills and his size, he's probably somewhere in the middle 6 on the wing, and I think he would be ideal on a power play where you give him that little extra time and space, that little extra bit of time and space, and he's going to excel when the speed aspect of it is not quite as important. He's very opportunistic. He has a good release of the puck, and he's accurate with his shot. But again, it's all about those first few steps where he just seems a little bit slow when he has to change direction or has to move quickly. He was named the captain of Windsor, and I think that also speaks volumes about it. And the other thing I like about him, he has different assets that can help him in any given game. So if he's not scoring, he's sound in all 3 zones. He can be physical when he needs to be. He can pass well if he's not scoring. If he's not playing, really, really well defensively, well, his shot is good enough. So I think there is a lot of different aspects of his game where if one of them is not necessarily clicking, well, then he can make up for it in another way. And that way he's not hurting the team so much, even if he's not necessarily putting the puck in the net. Now, Windsor has struggled a bit. You got what is essentially a leader and a good player on a not so great team. But to me, the concern about Greentree is indeed the skating ability, and you don't want to draft Oliver Wahlstrom 2.0 unless you're going to give the guy a chance to prove he can do it and work with him on his skating and let him show that even though he may not be the fastest skater in the world, his hockey sense, his release, the other aspects of his game can overcome that and still make him a quality NHL player. Most scouts and experts have him going somewhere between 16, 17 overall and maybe the mid 30s. So again, this year's draft, once you get past the first, dozen or so picks, there's not as much consensus. Greentree is either considered the second half of the first round or the first half of the second round. We'll see, where he ends up. If you're looking for a power forward with some skill, probably a second or third line guy, you could do a lot worse than Liam Greentree. That's the guy we're looking at today as far as our potential Islanders draft profiles. He is a guy who continues to grow and develop, still only 18 years old, can probably put even a little bit more weight on that 211-pound frame, but to have him that big already at 18, again, you get the feeling that if his skating improves just a smidge, or that he can overcome the skating, he is a guy who may not need as much time to be ready for the NHL as some of the other players who need to get bulked up and add a little muscle to their frame to be effective against the best players in the world. All right, we have got more to get to on today's show. We will conclude our player-by-player look at the Islanders season. We'll talk about goalie Semyon Varlamov. What was Varly's season like? What did he do well? What did he do poorly? And what is his future like with the Islanders, his role next year? We'll have all of that, plus our Islanders birthday of the day coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available for U.S. customers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. So we finally reached the end of our player-by-player review of the Islanders season, and I figured what better way to close things out than with goalie Semyon Varlamov. Varly, had a pretty solid season for the New York Islanders. Only played in 28 games, but went 14-8-4, had 3 shutouts, a 2.60 goals against average, and a .918 save percentage. Now, Varly turned 36 at the end of April, so he is getting up there in years, but statistically, his goals against average was better than it was a year ago. His save percentage was also better than it was a year ago. He won more games. He lost fewer games, at least in regulation. And when it came playoff time and when it came to the stretch drive, when Ilya Sorokin was more or less out of gas, it was Semyon Varlamov whose strong play down the stretch got the New York Islanders into the playoffs and who kept the Islanders in a playoff series against the Carolina Hurricanes, where, let's face it, the Islanders were not the more talented team on the ice. And in most of those games, they were not the better team on the ice, but Varly at least kept them in it. They even did manage to win one game, and you sort of wonder, had Varly started game 3 at UBS Arena, whether or not the Islanders might have been able to win that game, and maybe the series takes on a different complexion. But overall, the thing I love about Semyon Varlamov as a backup goalie, and that is essentially his role, even though, he finished as the starter in the playoffs, mostly because Ilya Sorokin was exhausted and not playing particularly well down the stretch. But that Semyon Varlamov, if you need him to start 3 or 4 games, 5 games in a row, if Sorokin goes down, he's capable of doing that. He is cool as a cucumber, never gets too high, never gets too low. His teammates really do seem to enjoy playing with him, and he does have a very healthy and productive relationship with Ilya Sorokin. It's not like Sorokin feels threatened by Varly or that he's upset if Varly is in between the pipes. These two guys, Varlamov has been a mentor to Sorokin, both on and off the ice, helping his younger teammate from Russia adjust to life in the United States, learn English, learn about, living here in the New York metropolitan area and playing in the National Hockey League. So to me, as long as his play doesn't drop off, I think Semyon Varlamov will remain a solid backup goalie for the Islanders, who, if there's an injury, you can count on him to start and take over as the number one guy like he did down the stretch and in the playoffs for the Islanders. That is definitely still possible. Now, contract-wise, look, I was not thrilled with the deal that Lou Lamoriello gave to Semyon Varlamov. Not so much because I thought it was a bad deal as far as the cap hit was concerned. I mean, it's essentially a $2.75 million a year deal, but for 4 years. So Varly is 36. He has 3 years left on his contract. The $2.75 million doesn't bother me much as long as his level of play sticks around. But, he'll be 39 when this contract is over. And each passing year, the possibility of him getting injured goes up a little bit, and the possibility of his play dropping off goes up a little bit. I expect Varlamov to start, let's say, somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 games next year, 35 as sort of the high end if there are injuries to Sorokin. If he gets injured, obviously it could be less, but 30 to 35 games in my mind seems like the right number, somewhere in the neighborhood of every, 2 out of every 5 games, let's say, over the course of the season, a 60-40 split. And I expect Varly to again be an important part of this team. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day. This one's a tough one because he only played 18 games with the Islanders. But Saturday is the 57th birthday of former Islanders defenseman Paul Stanton. Drafted in the 8th round by the Penguins back in 1985, spent 4 years as a Wisconsin Badger, joined the Penguins for the 90-91 season and won 2 Stanley Cups for them in 90-91 and 91-92. Later played for the Bruins, but then joined the Islanders for the 94-95 season. He split time between the Islanders and their farm team in the IHL, the Denver Grizzlies. Played 18 games for the Islanders, 4 assists, 4 points, 9 penalty minutes, and a -6 plus-minus on some struggling Islanders teams, and then finished his career in Europe, playing in both Germany and briefly in Sweden, hanging up his skates after 2004-2005. Stanton played in 295 NHL games, 14 goals, 63 points, 262 penalty minutes, add 2 goals, 12 points in 44 playoff games. Again, the 2 cup wins with the Pittsburgh Penguins. One of his better games as an Islander, April 12th, 1995, Islanders visiting the Florida Panthers. In this one, Tommy Soderstrom, the goalie for the Islanders, former Islander Mark Fitzpatrick, the goalie for the Panthers. And in this game, Stanton getting one of his 4 assists. In fact, he got some power play time in this game and assisted on the opening goal of the game by Derek King. Steve Thomas had the other assist. Islanders go on to win the game by a score of 3-1 on the road. For Paul Stanton, our Islanders birthday of the day, he had the assist. He had 1 shot on goal. And essentially for Stanton, this was the only assist he had in a game that the Islanders won. His other 3 came in losses. And that was more or less the end of his NHL career, as the following season he was off to Germany. So Paul Stanton is our Islanders birthday of the day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Everydayers, we're going to do that bonus episode. I tried to do one last weekend, but in my recovery from COVID. I just didn't have the energy yet, but I will get a makeup episode for one of the 2 episodes I missed when I was sick. So I'm going to try to get that out on Saturday. Let's see if we can get that done. So look for that, and we will continue looking at some draft prospects, and we'll have all the latest news as soon as the Stanley Cup is awarded. Look for trades and rights moves and all kinds of things to start happening very quickly. We'll be there to cover it every step of the way. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. And of course, let's go Islanders.